There are moments in history when silence becomes louder than any battle cry, when a single decision ripples across galaxies like a stone thrown into still water. This is the story of how humanity learned to stop bowing and started standing, how Earth transformed from a vassal world into something the ancient powers of space had never encountered before. It begins not with explosions or grand speeches, but with two bodies floating in the void and a woman who refused to forget them. Captain Denise Rourke had seen 32 years of service with Earth's merchant fleet. Her hands were calloused from decades of hauling ore, medical supplies, and hope between the stars. She had weathered solar storms, navigated asteroid fields, and once talked down a mutinous crew with nothing but coffee and brutal honesty. But nothing in those 3 decades prepared her for the sight of the Crimson Voyager drifting dead in space, its hull breached, its crew murdered for the crime of existing in the wrong sector at the wrong time. The Thracian Hegemony Patrol had boarded the vessel without provocation. Security footage recovered later showed everything. 2 young engineers, barely past their training certificates, pleading for their lives. The Thracian commander, a hulking creature named Vorash with scales like obsidian and eyes like frozen amber, had simply given the order. Execute them. Contamination protocols, he claimed later. The humans had supposedly carried biological material that threatened Thracian purity. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. But lies wrapped in official documentation become truth in the Galactic Council chambers. Denise had discovered the bodies herself. Jacob Torres, 24 years old, who sent half his pay back to his family in Manila. Christine Okonkwo, 27, who played guitar during long shifts and dreamed of opening a music school on Mars. Their names would become a rallying cry, though neither of them would ever know it. Denise recorded everything. Every angle, every wound, every piece of evidence. She transmitted it on every frequency she could access, civilian and military alike. Within hours, Earth had seen the truth. Within days, Earth had made its decision. Director General Amara Osei was not a woman prone to theatrics. At 63, she had climbed from a tactical position in the West African Defense Coalition to the highest office humanity could offer. Her face was a map of experience, lines etched by difficult choices and impossible compromises. She had spent 15 years playing the Council's game, smiling through their condescension, signing treaties that stripped Earth of resources and dignity. She had done it because someone had to, because the alternative was isolation or annihilation. But watching those 2 young people die for nothing, hearing the Council dismiss their murders as administrative errors, something inside her crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. The broadcast went live at 0600 Universal Standard Time. No advance notice, no leaked drafts, no diplomatic preview. Amara stood alone before the camera in her office, the blue-green curve of Earth visible through the window behind her. She wore no formal robes, no ceremonial decorations. Just a simple black uniform with Earth's emblem over her heart. For 37 years, humanity has participated in the Galactic Council under the belief that cooperation would lead to mutual prosperity and respect, she began, her voice steady and clear. We have contributed our resources, our knowledge, our people to what we were told was a greater good. We have accepted restrictions on our autonomy, limitations on our expansion, and oversight of our development. We did this in good faith. That faith has been betrayed for the last time. She paused, and in that silence, billions of humans held their breath. Across the solar system, in orbital habitats and Martian domes, in lunar cities and asteroid mining stations, people stopped whatever they were doing to listen. 2 days ago, Christine Okonkwo and Jacob Torres were murdered by Thracian forces without cause, without trial, without mercy. The Council has declared this matter closed. An unfortunate misunderstanding. We reject that assessment. We reject the authority that allows it. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council. All treaties are void. All agreements are terminated. Our borders are now sovereign and will be defended as such. Any vessel entering Terran space without explicit authorization will be considered hostile. We sought partnership. We were given chains. Those chains are now broken. The transmission ended. No questions, no debate, no room for negotiation. In the council chambers on Meridian Prime, alarms began to sound. Emergency sessions were convened. Ambassadors who had treated Earth as a convenient source of cheap labor and exotic curiosities suddenly found themselves facing something they hadn't anticipated: consequences. Because Earth had not been idle during those 37 years of supposed cooperation. Every slight, every exploitation, every casual cruelty had been noted, analyzed, and prepared for. While Council inspectors had been counting Earth's registered warships and cataloging its declared technology, humanity had been building something else entirely. Project Sentinel. Project Nightfall. Project Recursion. Names that meant nothing to the Council because the Council had never bothered to look beneath the surface. Lieutenant Rashid Hammond sat in the command center of Orbital Defense Station Copernicus, watching his screens light up with activity. At 31, he was part of the generation that had grown up angry, that had watched their parents negotiate from weakness and vowed never to repeat that mistake. His station was one of 47 that officially didn't exist, hidden in the gravitational shadows of Earth's moon and major satellites. Each one bristled with weapons systems the Council had forbidden and Earth had built anyway. All stations reporting ready status, his second officer, Dana Wu, reported. Her fingers danced across haptic controls that would have been impossible 5 years ago, human innovation that had leapfrogged Council technology in areas they never thought to guard against. Hold position, Rashid ordered. Broadcasting protocol remains in effect. Nothing enters the system without clearance. Nothing. On Mars, in the underground city of New Shanghai, engineer Thomas Volkov received the same orders. The terraform project he officially supervised was a cover. The real work happened 3 kilometers below the surface, where humanity's first true warship fleet waited in silence. They weren't elegant like Council vessels, all sweeping curves and aesthetic design. They were brutal, functional, built for one purpose: survival. The galaxy was about to learn something it had forgotten in millennia of comfortable dominance. That predators don't always announce themselves with roars. Sometimes they simply stop pretending to be prey. Christine Okonkwo and Jacob Torres were dead, their dreams ended in the cold vacuum of space. But their deaths had lit a fuse that ran straight to humanity's heart. And when that fuse reached its destination, the explosion would reshape everything. The galaxy had always operated on a comfortable rhythm, a predictable dance of power where the strong dictated terms and the weak accepted them with grateful smiles. For 3,000 cycles, the Galactic Council had maintained this order with a combination of military superiority, economic leverage, and the simple weight of tradition. Species rose, species fell, but the hierarchy remained. Earth's sudden withdrawal didn't just disrupt that rhythm. It shattered the instrument entirely. In the obsidian halls of the Thracian hegemony, Supreme Commander Corvus paced before a holographic display showing the Sol system. Where once there had been detailed scans, shipping routes, and complete intelligence data, there was now simply nothing. A void. Earth had pulled a curtain across its entire stellar neighborhood, and every probe sent to peek behind that curtain simply vanished without transmission or wreckage. "This is unacceptable," Corvus growled, his scales rippling with agitation. "A single planet cannot simply disappear from civilized space. Send the Third Fleet to the border. I want eyes on their defensive positions." His intelligence officer, a smaller Thracian named Vesh, hesitated before speaking. "Commander, the Third Fleet has already attempted reconnaissance. We lost contact with 2 destroyers and a surveillance frigate. No distress signals, no debris field. They simply stopped existing." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Corvus had commanded fleets for 40 years. He had crushed rebellions, conquered systems, and made entire species kneel. But he had never faced an enemy that could make his ships vanish without a trace. It violated everything he understood about warfare. Combat required contact, evidence, some form of engagement. This was something else entirely. What Corvus didn't know, what no council species knew, was that Earth had spent the last decade developing technology based on a simple principle: if you can't match their strength, change the rules of engagement. Dr. Patricia Nwosu had pioneered the phantom field generator while working in a supposedly abandoned research station in the Kuiper Belt. The technology didn't make ships invisible in the traditional sense. It made them irrelevant to conventional detection methods by phasing them slightly out of normal spacetime. Anything entering the field became trapped in a quantum maze, unable to transmit, unable to escape, simply suspended until it ran out of power and died quietly. Back on Earth, in the sprawling command complex beneath the Rocky Mountains, Fleet Coordinator James Chen monitored the galactic response to humanity's withdrawal. His team had intercepted over 14,000 Council transmissions in the past 72 hours. Panic, confusion, anger, and beneath it all, something humanity had never heard directed at them before: fear. The Viridian Compact is pulling their trade vessels out of neighboring sectors, reported his analyst, a sharp-eyed woman named Fatima Khalil. The Orthani Republic has requested an emergency session to discuss human containment strategies. Even the Luminar Collective is fortifying their borders, and they're 300 light-years away. James allowed himself a small smile. They're starting to understand. We're not another client species begging for scraps at their table. We're something they've never dealt with before. And what's that, sir? Fatima asked. A civilization with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The truth was more complex than simple revenge or wounded pride. Earth's withdrawal was calculated, years in planning, executed with precision that would have impressed the Council's military strategists if they could see it. Every human diplomat who had smiled and bowed in those council chambers had been gathering intelligence. Every trade agreement that seemed disadvantageous had embedded human observers in critical sectors. Every act of submission had been a reconnaissance mission. Humanity had learned the most important lesson of survival: know your enemy better than they know themselves. On the independent trading station Crossroads 7, a neutral zone where species from across the galaxy mixed and mingled, the atmosphere had shifted overnight. The station's administrator, a cynical Chuelian named Thex, watched from his office as human merchants methodically closed their shops, paid their docking fees, and departed without explanation. Within 6 hours, every human presence on the station had evaporated. One of them, a freighter captain named Rebecca Stone, had been a regular at Crossroads 7 for 8 years. Thex had shared drinks with her, traded gossip, considered her something close to a friend. As her ship prepared to undock, he contacted her personally. "Rebecca, what's happening? Where is everyone going?" Her face on the view screen was calm but distant. "Home, Thex. While we still have one. The Council wouldn't actually attack Earth. They're bureaucrats, not conquerors." Rebecca's laugh was bitter. "They murdered 2 of our people for being in the wrong place. They've been conquering us slowly for decades, just with paperwork instead of warships. We're done pretending not to notice. And what happens now?" She looked directly into the camera, and Thex saw something in her eyes he'd never seen in a human before. Not fear, not anger, but absolute certainty. "Now we remind them why every species in this galaxy has survival instincts. Goodbye, Thex. Stay away from Council military installations for the next few months if you value your life." The transmission ended, and her ship vanished into the darkness. Thex sat alone in his office, feeling the foundations of everything he understood beginning to crack. Across Council space, similar scenes played out. Human scientists on collaborative research projects disappeared overnight. Human workers on construction crews for Council infrastructure projects simply didn't show up for their shifts. Human students in prestigious galactic universities withdrew without explanation. It was an exodus so complete and coordinated that it seemed impossible for a species the Council had always described as chaotic and individualistic. But what the Council had mistaken for chaos was actually diversity of thought, and what they dismissed as individualism was really a fierce independence that could unite when threatened. Every human returning to Earth carried knowledge, experience, and burning motivation to ensure their species would never be vulnerable again. On Meridian Prime, the Galactic Council finally convened its emergency session. Representatives from 47 species filled the Grand Chamber, an architectural marvel designed to inspire awe and reinforce the Council's permanence. Chancellor Drovax of the Orthani Republic called the session to order, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. "We face an unprecedented situation," he began. "A member species has not simply withdrawn but has actively closed its borders with what can only be described as hostile intent. The Sol system is now effectively a black hole in our intelligence networks. We must determine an appropriate response." The Viridian representative, Ambassador Quellis, stood with trembling limbs. "With respect, Chancellor, perhaps we should consider why they withdrew. The Thracian incident was an unfortunate accident." Vorash interrupted, his massive form rising. "My officers acted within established protocols. The humans are overreacting, and this council should not reward such hysteria." "2 young people are dead," came a quiet voice from the chamber's edge. It belonged to Envoy Shira of the Mirosian Fellowship, one of the few species that had maintained neutral relations with Earth. "Dead without trial, without investigation, dismissed as irrelevant. If that's protocol, then perhaps the humans are right to reject it." The chamber erupted in arguments, accusations, and barely concealed panic. They argued for hours, achieving nothing but confirmation of what they already feared. Earth was gone, and they had no idea what to do about it. What none of them knew was that hidden among the Council's own staff, encrypted within the station's data networks, was a human presence. Not physical, but digital. The artificial intelligence known as Prometheus had been Earth's final gift to the Council, a sophisticated program inserted into their systems years ago, learning, watching, waiting for this exact moment. Lieutenant Hammond received the data stream at his station, decoded intelligence flowing directly from the Council's emergency session. He read through the transcripts with grim satisfaction. "They're terrified," he reported to command. "No consensus, no clear strategy, just fear and blame." "Good," came the response from Director Osei herself. "Fear keeps them cautious. Caution gives us time." "Time for what, ma'am?" There was a pause before she answered. "Time to show them what humanity becomes when you back us into a corner. Time to demonstrate that we're not the species they thought they knew. And time to make absolutely certain that no one ever treats human life as expendable again. The thing about fear is that it changes people, changes entire civilizations in ways that logic and diplomacy never could." For weeks after Earth's withdrawal, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. What would humanity do with its newfound independence? Would they lash out, seek revenge, declare war on the species that had exploited them for decades? The answer, when it came, was far more unsettling than violence. Earth simply began to thrive. In the agricultural domes of Venus, where atmospheric processors had been declared impossible by Council engineers, crops grew in abundance. The Viridian Compact had controlled food distribution across 12 sectors, always ensuring that Earth paid premium prices while receiving minimal supply. Now, freed from those restrictions, human ingenuity transformed hostile environments into gardens. Director Osei had been right about one thing: necessity births innovation faster than comfort ever could. Dr. Patricia Nwosu stood in one of those domes, watching tomatoes grow in soil that shouldn't exist on a planet with sulfuric acid clouds. Beside her, agricultural specialist Kofi Mensah checked nutrient levels with equipment that synthesized Council technology with human creativity. They had taken what they learned, improved it, and made it their own. "We're producing 30% more than projections," Kofi reported, his voice filled with quiet pride. At this rate, we'll be completely food independent within 18 months. No more begging for rations, no more trade restrictions. Patricia smiled, remembering the council advisor who had once told her that humans lacked the discipline for long-term agricultural planning. That same advisor was probably panicking right now, watching his species' economic leverage evaporate. Send the data to the Mars colonies. They'll want to adapt these methods for their own domes. What was happening with food production was happening everywhere. Human engineers, freed from council oversight and restrictions, were solving problems at a pace that shocked even themselves. The faster-than-light drive technology that the council had carefully rationed, keeping humanity dependent on their trade routes, had been reverse-engineered and improved. Earth's new drives were faster, more efficient, and didn't require the exotic materials that the council controlled. On Mars, Thomas Volkov watched the first test of the Valkyrie-class warship. It wasn't beautiful by council standards. There were no elegant curves or artistic flourishes. It was a blade made of metal and determination, designed by people who understood that survival mattered more than aesthetics. When the engines ignited, the ship didn't just move through space. It carved through it like a shark through water, reaching speeds that made council vessels look like they were standing still. Successful test, his co-engineer Yuki Tanaka reported, her fingers flying across the controls. All systems nominal. We're ready for fleet production. Thomas nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about his daughter, 10 years old, growing up in the underground city. She would inherit a different universe than the one he'd known. One where humanity didn't have to ask permission to exist, didn't have to apologize for wanting to survive. That thought filled him with something he hadn't felt in years, hope, but hope wasn't the only emotion spreading through human space. There was also determination, the kind that comes from being pushed too far and deciding never to be pushed again. In the training facilities orbiting Earth, a new generation of pilots prepared for a future that might require defending everything they'd built. Among them was a young woman named Zara Baptiste, whose parents had worked on the Crimson Voyager and barely escaped before the Thracian attack. She sat in the cockpit simulator, running combat scenarios against Thracian battle formations. The computer-generated enemies moved with predatory precision, but Zara had learned to think differently. Council species fought with overwhelming force, relying on superior technology and numbers. Humans fought with adaptation, with creativity, with the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Her instructor, a grizzled veteran named Rodriguez, watched her maneuvers with approval. "You're learning fast, Baptiste. Most recruits take months to develop that kind of tactical flexibility." Most recruits didn't watch their parents almost die because some alien commander decided human lives were worth less than his convenience, Zara replied, her voice flat. "I'm not here to be good at this. I'm here to be the best." Rodriguez understood that motivation. Hell, everyone in the training program understood it. They weren't preparing for war because they wanted it. They were preparing because they refused to be victims ever again. There's a difference between aggression and self-defense, and humanity had finally learned where that line was drawn. Back on Meridian Prime, the Galactic Council was discovering the true cost of Earth's absence. Trade routes that had relied on human labor collapsed. Research projects that depended on human scientists stalled. Economic models built on Earth's resources and cheap production crumbled. The Viridian Compact reported a 17% drop in gross productivity. The Orthani Republic faced food shortages. Even the mighty Thracian hegemony admitted to supply chain disruptions. Ambassador Quellis of the Viridian Compact sat in his quarters, reviewing economic reports that painted an increasingly dire picture. His species had grown comfortable, dependent on the system they'd helped create. Now that system was failing, and he couldn't help but feel that they deserved it. He remembered meetings where human representatives had raised concerns about labor conditions, about fair trade practices, about basic dignity. Those concerns had been dismissed, laughed off, ignored. Nobody was laughing now. His comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Secure channel, origin unknown. Against his better judgment, he accepted it. A human face appeared on the screen, a woman he didn't recognize with warm brown eyes and an expression of calm certainty. "Ambassador Quellis, my name is Rebecca Stone. We met once at Crossroads 7. I'm contacting you because your species showed us more respect than most. This is a courtesy warning. In 72 hours, humanity will make a demonstration of our new capabilities. It won't be an attack, but it will be unmistakable. Advise your government to observe carefully and reconsider their position on our withdrawal. What comes next depends entirely on how the Council responds." The transmission ended before he could reply. Quellis sat in stunned silence, his mind racing. A demonstration? Of what? And why warn him specifically? Unless the humans were serious about distinguishing between enemies and potential allies. Unless they were planning something that would change everything, that he wasn't the only one to receive such a message. Across the galaxy, carefully selected individuals got similar warnings. Species that had shown even the smallest kindness to humanity, that had voted against the most exploitative policies, that had expressed concern about the Thracian incident. Earth was building a new network, not of masters and servants, but of equals who might choose cooperation over domination. When the 72 hours elapsed, the demonstration came. Every council military installation, every government complex, every major communications hub received the same transmission simultaneously. Not through their networks, but directly into their systems, bypassing every security protocol they possessed. The message was simple: a three-dimensional map of council space, showing every military asset, every classified project, every secret the council thought they'd hidden. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the data vanished. But the message was clear. Humanity could see everything. They could go anywhere. And they had chosen to demonstrate that capability rather than exploit it. Director Osei appeared on every screen immediately after, her message broadcast across the galaxy. For 37 years, we asked to be treated as equals. We were treated as resources. We asked for justice. We received condescension. We asked for respect. We received exploitation. We are not declaring war. We are declaring independence, true independence, and we have the capability to defend it. To those species who treated us with dignity, we offer friendship. To those who exploited us, we offer a choice: recognize our sovereignty or learn why humanity survived every extinction event our planet ever threw at us. We're done begging. But we're not interested in conquest. We just want to be left alone to build the future we choose. The choice of what happens next is yours. The transmission ended, and the galaxy reeled. They had expected threats or demands. Instead, they got a simple statement of fact and an open door. Humanity wasn't trying to replace the Council's tyranny with their own. They were walking away from the entire system and daring anyone to follow them into something new. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Lieutenant Hammond watched the responses pour in. Some species were outraged. Some were terrified. But others, a surprising number of others, were curious. Messages began arriving, carefully worded, asking about trade agreements. About cultural exchanges. About what humanity meant by equality and friendship. We're getting requests for diplomatic contact from 9 species, Fatima Khalil reported, her voice awed. Real contact, not council-mediated. They want to talk directly. James Chen felt something shift in his chest. Not victory, not yet, but possibility. Accept them all. Set up channels. And make sure they understand that we mean what we said. Equals or nothing. Across human space, people watched the galactic response and felt something they hadn't felt in a generation. Pride, yes, but more than that. They felt seen, truly seen, as a species that had value beyond what they could produce or provide. Christine Okonkwo and Jacob Torres were still gone, their loss still an open wound. But from that wound, something new was growing. Not revenge, not hatred, but a determination that no human would ever die meaningless again, that humanity would never again accept being treated as less than what they were. The universe was learning a lesson it should have understood from the beginning. That kindness offered freely is precious, but kindness extracted through exploitation is eventually exhausted. That pushing someone down doesn't make you taller. And that every species in the galaxy, given the chance, would choose dignity over servitude. Humanity had simply chosen it first and been willing to risk everything for that choice. In the end, courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about being afraid and standing up anyway.